At my own celebratory dinner, my father gave me an ultimatum that froze the air. My heart shattered as he looked at me, a stranger, and said the one thing I never thought I'd hear. Half the money, or you're no longer my daughter. My name is Meredith. I'm 38, and for most of my life, I was the silent cog in a well-oiled machine of Southern tradition and expectation. My family wasn't just a family, they were a Savannah institution, built on old money and the carefully curated illusion of perfection. But illusions, no matter how beautiful, eventually shatter. Mine shattered over a dinner table laden with my mother's porcelain and my father's lies. He looked at me, his eyes cold over the rim of his crystal water glass, and delivered the line that would detonate my entire world. You will provide $480,000 to save this family's legacy, or you are no longer a part of it. The legacy he spoke of was my golden boy brother Gregory's failing real estate empire, a monument to arrogance built on our parents' desperate funding. That night, faced with an impossible choice between my future and their pride, I chose myself. I walked away. This is the story of how I let them burn down the very pedestal they placed themselves on, and how I found my own worth in the ashes. This is one of those family revenge stories you hear about. Only this one is mine. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, like your only purpose was to fill a space they couldn't be bothered with, just hit that like button. It tells me I'm not the only one who's had to fight to be seen. Before I take you inside the suffocating walls of that Savannah mansion, before I show you the perfectly polished silver that hid so much tarnish, I need you to understand that this wasn't a sudden storm. It was a slow, creeping flood I'd been waiting in for 38 years. The ultimatum wasn't the start of the war. It was just the final, deafening cannon blast. For years, I was their quiet problem solver, the responsible one, the daughter who was expected to achieve on her own so they could pour all their resources, financial and emotional, into my brother, Gregory. He was never just their son, he was their masterpiece, their legacy in the making. And I was the sturdy, unremarkable frame meant to hold him up. I'm going to lay it all out for you, piece by painful piece, because justice isn't just about the ending. It's about revealing the truth, layer by rotten layer, until the foundation itself is exposed. I want you to see what I saw. I want you to feel the weight of it, just as I did. Let me know in the comments. Were you the scapegoat or the golden child in your family? Type fixer if you were always the one cleaning up the messes. Or type star if you were the one they always paraded around. I really want to see the balance in our community here, because understanding your role is the first step to breaking free from the script they wrote for you. So, let's step inside that mansion. Picture a sprawling colonial home on a street draped with Spanish moss in Savannah's historic district, where the air is thick with the scent of magnolias and old secrets. To the outside world, we were the epitome of Southern grace. My father, Walter, was a titan of local real estate, a man whose handshake was supposedly as solid as the foundations of the historic buildings he sold. My mother, Dolores, was the reigning queen of the charity circuit, her photograph a regular feature in society magazines, always perfectly poised. They presided over what the city whispered of as a $200 million estate, a figure that felt more like a religious mantra than a financial reality. That number was their identity. But inside those walls, the air wasn't filled with the warmth of a home. It was choked with the silent, suffocating pressure of keeping up appearances. The grand ballroom wasn't for dancing. It was for staging events to impress potential investors. The hushed phone calls my father took in his mahogany-paneled study weren't about new triumphs, but about placating creditors and restructuring loans. The smile my mother wore for the cameras would dissolve the second the front door clicked shut, replaced by a tight-lipped anxiety about gossip and social standing. Our home wasn't a sanctuary, it was a gilded cage, and the family fortune wasn't a safety net, but a tightrope we all had to walk, knowing that one misstep meant a fall from grace that, in their world, was worse than death. On that tightrope, there were two performers, the star of the show and the safety net. My brother, Gregory, was the star, the heir. I was the safety net, the spare. Everything in our lives was dictated by these unspoken roles. When it came time for college, Gregory's path was paved with legacy donations to an Ivy League school. My path was a maze of financial aid forms and scholarship essays for a state university, an achievement my parents greeted with the same enthusiasm as if I'd announced I'd successfully balanced a checkbook. For his 16th birthday, a gleaming new Mercedes convertible appeared in the driveway, a testament to his future status. For mine, I received a practical contribution towards a 10-year-old used sedan, a lesson in fiscal responsibility. When Gregory decided to launch his boutique real estate firm, my parents liquidated a stock portfolio and gave him a six-figure advance from his trust fund. He was, after all, being groomed to inherit the grand, mythical $300 million estate they spoke of in reverent tones. A year later, when I presented a meticulously researched business plan for a small marketing firm, my father patted my hand and said, "That's lovely, dear, but all our capital is tied up in securing Gregory's future." My future was never an investment. It was an expense I was expected to manage on my own. If you've ever felt like the forgotten one in your family, the quiet one whose successes were whispers while someone else's were parades, just type the city you're watching from in the comments. Let's see how far this silent strength reaches. For a decade, my life ran on a tight budget in a small apartment in a less fashionable part of the city, a world away from the manicured lawns of my childhood. My only indulgence was a weekly $2 lottery ticket, a harmless daydream I'd purchase with my groceries. Then, one Tuesday night, the daydream became real. I was sitting on my second-hand sofa when I checked the numbers, my heart transitioning from a steady beat to a frantic drum solo. The final amount, after taxes, was $960,000. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It was enough to change everything. But after that first wave of shock, a lifetime of conditioning kicked in. My first phone call wasn't to my parents to share the joyous news. My first call was to a wealth management attorney in Atlanta, 250 miles away from Savannah's prying eyes. I took 2 personal days off from work and drove there the next morning. I didn't celebrate, I strategized. On the lawyer's advice, before I even told a single soul, we created an ironclad, irrevocable trust. He explained it was a legal fortress, a vault that I controlled, but that was legally separate from me as an individual. It was designed to protect the assets from creditors, lawsuits, and, as I intuitively knew I needed, from familial claims. It wasn't an act of aggression. It was an act of self-preservation, an instinct honed by years of knowing that if I ever stumbled, there would be no family safety net to catch me. I had to be my own. With my financial fortress built, a small, foolish part of me allowed hope to creep in. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the one thing that could finally make them see me, not as the spare part, but as an equal. So, I made the call. The moment the words "I won the lottery" left my lips, the distracted tone in my mother's voice vanished, replaced by a syrupy sweetness I hadn't heard since I was a child. "Oh, Meredith, darling. We must celebrate. A special family dinner just for you." I agreed, cautiously optimistic, walking into that house a week later armed with a bottle of champagne and a lifetime of yearning for their approval. The scene was set for a prodigal daughter's return. The good china, which only ever came out for Christmas or to impress my father's business partners, was gleaming on the dining table. They lavished me with praise I'd never heard, calling me brilliant, smart, and a true credit to the family name. For about an hour, I let myself believe it. Then, as the main course was served, the trap began to close. My father, Walter, started his speech, not by toasting my good fortune, but by talking about the fragility of a family legacy. He spoke of their name in Savannah, of the empire he'd built, and of the temporary headwinds Gregory's business was facing. He framed my win not as my personal triumph, but as a timely miracle for the collective, us. The air in the room shifted. This wasn't a celebration. It was a corporate board meeting, and I was about to find out I wasn't the guest of honor. I was the asset being targeted for acquisition. As if on cue, my brother Gregory walked in, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my car. He didn't come to celebrate, he came to close the deal. My mother, Dolores, was the one to speak first. "Darling," she began, her voice dripping with counterfeit concern, "Gregory's company just needs a small bridge loan to secure the next round of funding. $480,000 would be more than enough. Think of it as an investment in us." I looked at them, the three of them, a united front of expectation. I kept my voice steady and calm. I'm not in a position to make loans or investments. I might be able to help with a small gift, perhaps 25,000, with no strings attached. The word gift hung in the air like an insult. My mother's face tightened. A gift? Meredith, this is about duty. After everything we've given you, that's when my father's patience snapped. He slammed his palm on the antique dining table, making the china jump. His voice, a low growl that I hadn't heard since I was a child, filled the room. We're not asking, I am telling you. $480,000. Half of your winnings. You will transfer it to your brother's account by the end of the week. He leaned forward, his face flushed. Or you will walk out that door and you will no longer be a part of this family. We will be done. You choose. If you have ever been forced to choose between setting yourself on fire to keep your family warm or finally choosing your own survival, hit that subscribe button right now. This is a community for those who chose to survive. I stood up from that table, my movements slow and deliberate. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I simply picked up my purse, walked to the front door, and left the life I once knew behind. For 2 months, a deafening silence followed. Then, my mother decided to escalate. The annual Savannah Preservation Trust Gala was the crown jewel of her social calendar. I was there not as her daughter, but as a guest of my firm, a sign of my own emerging professional life. She saw her opportunity. Cornering me near the silent auction, with several of the city's most influential women within earshot, she began her performance. Her voice trembled and a single, perfect tear traced a path down her cheek. I just don't know what we did wrong, she whispered theatrically, dabbing her eye with a silk handkerchief. To have your own child turn her back on you, after winning so much. It's just heartbreaking. All eyes turned to me, a jury of pearls and judgment. The old Meredith would have crumbled. But this was someone new. I met my mother's gaze, my voice low but clear, carrying easily in the sudden quiet. Mother, I said, a chilling calm in my tone. I will not be funding Gregory's failed business ventures with nearly $500,000. If our family's honor is so fragile that it must be purchased with my lottery ticket, then perhaps it was never worth saving in the first place. A collective, sharp intake of breath rippled through the onlookers. My mother's mask of sorrow shattered, replaced by a flash of pure fury. I simply gave a polite nod, turned my back on her, and walked away, leaving her stranded in the spotlight of her own making. The story of what happened at the gala spread through Savannah society like wildfire. Public humiliation, however, wasn't enough. If they couldn't control my money, they would try to destroy my means of making it. A week later, I was called into my boss's office. My heart hammered against my ribs, a cold dread washing over me. This was it. Their influence had finally reached my sanctuary. My boss, a stern but fair man named Mr. Davison, gestured for me to sit down. Meredith, he began, his expression unreadable. I received a rather unusual call this morning from your brother, Gregory. He told me how Gregory, in a tone of feigned fraternal concern, had warned him that I was emotionally unstable after a severe family breakdown and that my judgment might be compromised, making me a potential liability to the firm. It was a dagger, aimed with precision. But it failed to strike. Mr. Davison leaned back in his chair. I've been hearing whispers about your brother's financial troubles for months, he said, his voice flat. His call told me everything I need to know about his character, not yours. Your position here is secure. Your work speaks for itself. The relief was so overwhelming it almost brought me to my knees. He didn't just fail, his attack backfired, exposing his own desperation and cementing my reputation for integrity. It's a different kind of pain when someone from your own blood tries to tear you down. If you've ever had to protect your peace while someone else was trying to start a war, just type "unbreakable" in the comments. Let's create a roll call of survivors. That was the moment I knew. My brother wasn't just spoiled, he was cruel. And my decision to walk away wasn't just right, it was necessary for my survival. Those final, venomous attacks were, in a strange way, a gift. They severed the last lingering threads of obligation and childish hope. The door to my past didn't just close, It was bolted shut, and for the first time, I was completely free to build a life that was truly my own. I started by investing in myself. I joined a mentorship program for female entrepreneurs in Savannah, a circle of brilliant, ambitious women who valued my ideas, not my bloodline. It was there I met Eleanor, a sharp, witty graphic designer who had her own stories of escaping a toxic family. Over late-night coffee and early morning brainstorming sessions, she became the sister I never had, our bond forged in mutual respect, not rivalry. I started dating again, this time far away from the shallow pool of Savannah's elite. I met a man named David, a history professor at the local college whose passion was for stories of the past, not for social status. He was drawn to my resilience, not my bank account, which he knew nothing about for months. He listened. He actually listened. And with him, I learned that a relationship could be a safe harbor, not a battlefield. I even made my first real investment, not in some high-risk venture, but a small, 5-figure stake in Eleanor's growing design firm. It was more than money. It was a statement. I was using my resources to build a new foundation, a chosen family, where support was given freely and success was a shared celebration, not a weapon. For the first time, my life felt genuinely rich, not because of the money and the trust, but because of the people I was choosing to share it with. Almost a year to the day after I walked out of that house, I was standing in a crowded room, clinking a glass of champagne with Eleanor. The small marketing firm I'd invested in had just won a prestigious local business award. My name was on the plaque not as a daughter of a once great family, but as a co-founder. I was building my own legacy, on my own terms. The next morning, as I sat in my sunlit kitchen reading the Business Journal's feature on our win, another headline on the society page caught my eye. It felt like a scene from a movie. The headline read, "Venerable Savannah estate to be auctioned following bankruptcy filing." It was my childhood home. The article detailed how Gregory's company had officially collapsed under a mountain of debt, filing for Chapter 7 liquidation. The $200 million illusion had evaporated, taking my parents' reputation with it. The very thing they had sacrificed me for their precious name, their standing in the community, was now a public spectacle of failure. I didn't feel a surge of joy or a triumphant laugh. I felt a profound, quiet stillness. It was the universe balancing its books. The empire they chose over their own daughter had crumbled to dust, while I, the forgotten spare part, was quietly, successfully building my own. They say the best revenge is living well. If you believe that karma, sooner or later, finds every address, just type justice in the comments below. Let's see a wave of you who trust that the universe is watching. I closed the newspaper, took a sip of my coffee, and for the first time, felt truly and completely free of their shadow. Another 6 months passed. The news of my family's downfall faded into old gossip, and my life moved forward, filled with work, love, and the quiet joy of earned stability. Then one evening, an email appeared in my inbox from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was just one word: Meredith. It was from my mother. The message was short, stripped of all its former drama and manipulation. It simply asked if I would be willing to meet them for coffee. There were no demands, no accusations, just a question. Against my better judgment, but guided by a curiosity I couldn't ignore, I agreed. I chose the place. A small, anonymous coffee shop in a strip mall, miles from the historic district they once ruled. When I saw them walk in, the change was so jarring it was almost cinematic. My father, Walter, who had always stood so tall in his tailored suits, was in a worn blazer, his shoulders slumped, as if carrying an invisible weight. My mother, Dolores, once the picture of polished perfection, looked ordinary. The designer handbag was gone, her hair was simpler, and the tired lines on her face told a story of sleepless nights. And Gregory. The golden boy was gone, replaced by a gaunt man with shadows under his eyes who couldn't seem to meet my gaze. They didn't look like villains anymore. They looked broken. They approached my table, hesitant, like strangers asking for directions. The power in the room had shifted so completely it felt like the floor was tilted. I was calm, and they were trembling. My mother spoke first, her voice barely a whisper. "Meredith, thank you for coming." I didn't speak. I just waited, letting the silence hang heavy between us. It was my father who broke it, his gaze fixed on the worn surface of the table. "We were wrong, Meredith," he said, the words sounding foreign and difficult in his mouth. "I was wrong. I was so obsessed with building a legacy, with the Vance name, that I failed to see the real treasure I had. I sacrificed my daughter for a name that's now worth nothing." My mother looked at me then, her eyes filled with a weary shame I'd never seen before. "And I let him," she said softly. I cared more about what people whispered at the country club than what my own heart was telling me. That night at the gala, I was so ashamed of what I had become, but I was too proud to stop. Then, Gregory finally looked up, and his eyes were red-rimmed. "I made the call to your boss," he said, his voice cracking. It was a disgusting, cowardly thing to do. I was entitled and weak. My entire life, I was handed everything, and I looked down on you because you had to earn it. I never understood that what you had wasn't luck, it was strength. And I tried to break it because I didn't have any of my own. They laid all their broken pieces on the table, a confession decades in the making. Have you ever received an apology you thought you would never hear? The kind that arrives years too late but still changes the air you breathe. Let me know in the comments if you believe true change is possible, or if some wounds are just too deep to ever fully heal. I listened to it all, the words I had screamed in my mind for years, now being spoken in quiet, humbled tones. It didn't erase the scars, but it was the first drop of rain on a land that had been in drought for a lifetime. I took a long, slow sip of my now cold coffee, gathering my thoughts. I looked at the three of them, stripped of their power and pride, and I didn't feel anger. I felt a quiet clarity. "I hear you," I said, my voice even. "And I believe you are sorry. But an apology doesn't erase the past." I leaned forward slightly, making sure they understood every word. "So, let me be very clear about the future. There will be no money, not now, not ever. My finances are my own, and they will not be used to fix the mistakes of the past. You have to find your own way back." I saw a flicker of understanding, not disappointment, in their eyes. "Any relationship we have from this day forward will be built on honesty and respect. It will be on my terms, and it will be slow. There are no more obligations." Then I turned to Gregory. He flinched, expecting, perhaps, another verbal blow. "I won't give you money," I said, "but I will give you a chance. I will pay for 3 months with a top-tier career counselor. He will help you rebuild your resume and find a path. But you have to do the work. This is a hand up, not a handout." For the first time, a genuine emotion other than shame crossed his face. Gratitude. He just nodded, unable to speak. I had not just set a boundary. I had drawn a map for a new world. A world where I was no longer their safety net, but perhaps, in time, just their daughter again, on equal footing. Walking away from that coffee shop, I felt a quiet peace I hadn't known before. It wasn't the vindication of a battle won. It was the profound stillness of a war finally over. And in that quiet, I finally understood the story's true lesson. The lottery ticket wasn't the prize. The $960,000 was never the real treasure. It was simply the catalyst. It was the key that forced a lock I had been too afraid to turn on my own, a lock that kept me chained to a dynamic that was slowly eroding my soul. My family had spent their entire lives confusing wealth with worth. They draped themselves in the symbols of success, the mansion, the cars, the social status, believing it made them valuable. When the money vanished, their sense of self vanished with it, leaving them hollow. I, on the other hand, had been forced to build my worth in the absence of their wealth. I built it through late nights at the office, through careful budgeting, through friendships based on character, not connections, and through the courage to stand alone. The money gave me security, yes, but it was the journey that followed the fight for my own autonomy that gave me my value. The ultimate family revenge wasn't watching their empire fall. It was the quiet, unshakable realization that their approval, their legacy, and their acceptance were no longer the metrics by which I measured myself. I had finally learned to be my own source of validation. The lottery didn't make me rich. It just gave me the leverage to discover the wealth I already had inside myself. It's been 2 years since that meeting in the coffee shop. Our relationship is not what it once was, And for that, I am grateful. It's something new, something quieter, built on the cautious ground of respect and clear boundaries. We meet for holidays, we have conversations, but the old dynamics of obligation and expectation are gone, replaced by a fragile but genuine effort on their part. Gregory is working a steady IT job, paying his own rent, and for the first time, he seems to be at peace. This journey taught me that justice isn't always a clap of thunder. Sometimes it's the quiet dawn after a long, destructive storm. And forgiveness, I've learned, is not about erasing a debt. It's about choosing to no longer be the collector. It's the act of putting down the heavy ledger of past wrongs so that your own hands are free to build a better future. The family you are born into gives you your roots, but sometimes, to truly grow, you must learn to build your own garden and choose what you allow to blossom there. You must learn to cultivate relationships that nourish you, not ones that drain you dry. My story began with a lottery ticket, a random stroke of luck. But the real win was the discovery that my own worth was never up for negotiation, and my peace was a price I was no longer willing to pay to feel like I belonged. That is the ultimate freedom. If this story, or any part of my journey, resonated with the quiet battles you are fighting in your own life, then this space is for you. Subscribe and join a community that understands that sometimes walking away is the first step toward finally coming home to yourself. Thank you for listening. And remember, your value is never defined by the role others assign to you, but by the courage you have to write your own.